Greetings and welcome to Vision, Intention, Strategy, your social work mentor with the new Social Worker magazine. Today, I really wanted to have a conversation with our school social workers who are promoting racial equity, a form of social justice in schools. So I have a question for you. Have you ever perceived yourself as a leader in promoting racial equity in schools? This is a question that me and my colleague, Dr. Summer Woodside, have often posed when we have provided workshops to school social work professionals. Our workshops focused on school social workers as leaders in facilitating racial equity. To learn more about those workshops, please see the link in the accompanying article. But our intention was to motivate and empower school social workers to see themselves as leaders in this particular area. But first, we had to equip them with a definition of what racial equity means. So here's just an excerpt from that definition. It says, racial equity is the condition that would be achieved if one's racial identity no longer predicted in a statistical sense how one fares. Now, that definition came from the Center for Assessment and Policy Development. There is more to it, and you can see the full definition either on that website or again within the accompanying article. Now, we were encouraging school social workers to see racial equity through a certain type of lens. And this lens was referred to as a racial equity lens. Here's an excerpt of the definition for that. It says that a racial equity lens brings into focus the ways in which race and ethnicity shape experiences with power, access to opportunity, treatment, and outcomes both today and historically. I obtained that definition from the Philanthropic Initiative for Racial Equity. So to see the full definition, you can visit that website as well. Now that we have been equipped with a definition of racial equity, a racial equity lens to be able to interpret and observe situations and experiences through in the school system. Now, what are some tips that can help school social workers advocate for equity within the school systems? So today I wanted to provide 3 tips to help school social workers do that. The first tip is to begin with the data. Whenever seeking to promote change in policy, it is important to assess the data first. So to seek it out at both your local, regional, and even national levels to determine if inequities and disparities exist within the school systems. For example, disparities in suspensions, inequities in reading and math scores. Use that data to see if there are patterns of inequities across specific groups. Tip number 2, examine the existing school policies. To further promote equity in schools, it is important to examine the current school policies to see if there is particular language or wording that helps to sustain inequitable practices. For example, are assessment processes and referral processes based on objective data, meaning measurable and observable? Or is it based on subjective perceptions based on the interpreter, the viewer, the person making a type of referral? Subjective measures could result in decisions influenced by forms of bias. As a result, this may lead to inequities in how certain policies are applied. Therefore, remember to explore those policies and standards that are in place for language and wording that may create, maintain, and sustain inequities in school systems. And then the third tip is to build a plan. So after assessing the data, after analyzing the specific policies, it is time to develop a plan of action. And action can take place in many forms. For example, developing an interdisciplinary team of professionals consisting of school personnel who can examine the data and further examine the policies to gain further insight. The use of such an interdisciplinary team allows the opportunity to create measurable goals, objectives, create trainings, presentations that can be provided across personnel. Then, after implementing an action plan, it is important to evaluate it. Did that plan actually reach its goals? Were the objectives met? Did knowledge increase? Was there a change in policies? Overall, when implementing a plan of action, it is important to continually review those outcomes. Begin with your school system. Determine what interventions are currently in place. In what ways can you build upon those efforts? And remembering that leadership is about influence and motivation. As always, I hope this information has been helpful. Until next time, everyone, take care.